It's great to be joined by these two gentlemen, as we've got Andrew Caley of Covers and we've got Tom Casale of Action Network joining me for this nice NFL Draft Roundtable. Gentlemen, it is great to have you aboard, and I'll just lead off with how you guys have been evaluating the draft and if it's been a little bit different than past drafts. Andrew, I'll just lead off here. Has this draft been a little bit tougher to be able to gauge? Because it just feels like the information has been a little bit more murky this year than it has been in past years.
Well, it's certainly, we don't know what's going to happen after the first pick is what it feels like. That's when the draft is really going to start in my minds with the Houston Texans. And like you said, there's been rumors that the board is leaked. Now Will Levis is the favorite to go in that spot. But what I've been reading is that C.J. Stroud is still in play, and so is Will Anderson and Tyree Wilson as well. So honestly, we don't really know what's going to be going on at number 2, and then that kind of sets the dominoes for the rest of the first round, I would say.
Yeah, but it is really interesting because we have seen that massive steam move coming on Will Levis. Like a week ago, you were able to get Will Levis to be the number 2 overall pick. It's some shots very much north of 10-1. Right now, he's minus 130. And Tom, how have you been trying to navigate all this? Because we have been seeing a lot of steam moves like Will Levis. At the number 1 overall pick, C.J. Stroud for much of the offseason was the betting favorite. Now it's Bryce Young at minus 2,000. It has been a very fluid situation, but at the same time, it still feels like there's a lot of unknowns with this draft as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always a little iffy on the information stuff. I wonder how many of these teams are actually telling people what they want to do. I think there's more misinformation than information, unless it's the Cowboys. Jerry just breaks down his whole draft board for you before the draft so you can see it. I remember back when I worked with the Patriots, we knew on the inside that the one guy they wanted was Darrelle Revis that year, and they were going to try to trade up to get him. And we would hear reports that the Patriots wanted to trade down in round 1 and all this stuff. That was just stuff they were leaking out. And they did actually try to trade up to get Revis, but the Jets got him with a better offer. So that stuff, it always makes me wonder, like, how much misinformation these teams are putting out. I just don't think there's too many GMs who are sitting there telling media members who they're going to draft.
Yeah, I don't think so as well. And then the one time that they're telling the truth, everyone's like, oh, they're lying. So they're actually able to get them. So it's sort of like a big giant game of poker. When are they actually bluffing? And when it's like, oh, they've actually got the nut flush or something like that. But that, I think, is very much a little bit of a chess game there. And Andrew, what are some of the things that you try to utilize to be able to find value on the NFL draft? Because this is an information-based market. This is not one of these markets where it's like, well, I think that insert team here is going to run the ball down their throat or anything like that. This is not really one where you can have too much of an opinion. Obviously, you can go back on just past information, what you've been noticing with teams and trends, but what do you try to be able to utilize in order to be able to find some value and be able to get to the best of the number before it moves?
I think Tom said it well there. Like, we really don't know what's going on in these drafts. Like, all of this C.J. Stroud slander you're hearing these days sounds like somebody just putting stuff out there so he can follow them, I would say. What you need to be doing is following a few select insiders, I would say, on Twitter. Stay on top of it. You're probably not going to get the best line available. Once something gets tweeted, those markets move extremely quick. I think the limits on these markets are also not very high, so it's not going to take a lot to move those markets as well. So things like the number 2 pick can be a very hard market to handicap. I would then tend to go look at markets more like the first player to be drafted at a certain position. For instance, at like offensive line, there's like a handful of guys who could go number 1. So maybe you find some value there. Or then you look at teams with specific needs, sort of thing. Who needs an offensive lineman? Who needs a wide receiver? And then you can go and look in those more specific markets instead of having to wait on the information that we definitely do not have.
And I think that, Andrew, you bring up an amazing point in that it's really, really hard to get the best number when it comes to the NFL draft because these numbers move within, I was going to say minutes, but that's probably timing it out a little bit too long. Typically within seconds of actually getting this information, like when Daniel Jeremiah drops his final mock draft, these numbers, they are going to be moving ridiculously. And Tom, my question to you is, how much do you want to gauge being able to get a bettable number versus a bested number? Because you don't want to get completely torpedoed in terms of closing line value, but I think one thing that is inevitable with the NFL draft is if you're looking to only bet the best of the market, congratulations, you might be able to get one or two bets in because this stuff moves so quickly and just ferociously.
I agree. I try to get a bettable number. It's hard for me to sit here and when there's a lot of quarterbacks involved too, that really shakes up the draft. Remember the year it was Baker and Josh Allen and all those guys? 2 days before the draft, I got Baker Mayfield at 10-1, and then remember 24 hours later he was like minus 4,000 when some information broke. But if you remember that year, like virtually every quarterback was a favorite to go one at one point, and then even like when the 49ers traded up, there's still questions whether they were going to take Trey Lance the whole time there up until the end. Some people say it was Mac Jones. So that's my strategy. If I see something that looks good and the number's good, I'm more likely to take it than to wait, because I think sometimes, like Andrew pointed out, these markets you can't bet $10,000 on who the Eagles are going to draft, right? So the odds move so swiftly, and sometimes I think there's a lot of overreaction to a couple of rumors.
Yep, I do agree with you there, and you are going to be finding much, much lower limits on the NFL draft than you are going to be finding on, I don't know, some sort of a playoff game in the NFL. I know it's a shocker, but that is the way that it goes about. And I do think that just taking a look at this market as well, you're going to be seeing a bunch of line moves as well. And Tom hit on something that I really like. Taking something a little bit earlier, sometimes it's not going to pan out. Sometimes you're going to get a little bit of a worse number. But, Andrew, how much do you subscribe to? If you see something that you like, take it a little bit early, just trying to bank on being ahead of the information rather than trying to get to it a little bit too late and just getting pretty much priced out of it.
I would completely agree. If you see a number you like, jump on it because you don't know if it's going to be there or not. I'm kicking myself. Dalton Kincaid saw a lot of steam a week ago or so, and he was the favorite to become the first tight end selected overall. But now it's back to Michael Mayer, the Notre Dame tight end, and I missed out on taking him at the plus money there. And when I saw it, I was like, I think there's still a chance he goes, because we haven't seen Kincaid test a whole bunch this offseason because of his injuries, and Meyer is kind of a known quantity at this point, and then the line was gone again, and it's just as quick as that.
Yeah, these numbers have been moving so rapidly, and Tom, out of all the markets that we've seen, because we're going to get to your bets on the flip side here in a few minutes, but out of all the markets that you've been taking a look at, out of all like the picks, positions, what have you had the toughest time gauging to this point? Because I feel like the number one pick, that's pretty much salted away, but as you mentioned, you're able to find Baker Mayfield at 10-1 a few years ago, and I very fondly remember that draft. That was a very swift move that happened on that one. But out of everything that you've been seeing, is there just a market or two where you feel like, man, it's so murky that I just don't want any part of this right now?
Yeah, it's one of the most popular ones. It's total quarterbacks taken in round one. I think that's a real tough one, because Hendon Hooker to me is interesting. I think he has a chance to be a good NFL quarterback. I don't know if I view him as a first-round pick, but again, I'm not the one drafting, so I try to figure out what these teams are going to do. But to me, if you're betting that market, I think Hendon Hooker is going to be the one that makes or breaks you.
I think so as well. I've heard a little bit about McKee coming out of Stanford as well, so I do think that is going to be interesting. I personally do have a little bit of a position on this one. They hung this at circa a few days ago, and I was able to get minus 110 on over 4.5 quarterbacks. Last I saw it was more around minus 170 to minus 180, so I pat myself on the back and just look forward to having the CLV garbage can that has become very popular on social media, and that'll probably be where that ends up, but you know what? I'll take what I can take there, and I know these two gentlemen have a lot of bets on the draft, as Andrew Caley does amazing work at Covers, and Tom Casale of Action Network, they are joining me right now. We're going to be taking a look at some of the bets that they've got for the NFL draft here in the next two segments, and we're also going to be taking a look at what they're looking at right now. That is up next on the Greg Peterson Experience on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Andrew, I know you've got a little bit of a position with Will Anderson. I know that he is still in play for that number 2 overall spot, and we've got a lot of intrigue when it comes to the top of the draft. But what did you wind up taking with Will Anderson? Because we've been seeing him associated with a lot of different things, and I know you've got a little bit of a plus money bet on him.
Yeah, and it's to be the first defensive player taken in the draft. And if you had told me that even a few weeks ago, that you give me plus money on Will Anderson to be the first defensive player taken, I would have called you crazy. But Tyree Wilson, the edge out of Texas Tech, he's getting a lot of steam right now. He's and for good reason. Like, he's a dominant defensive end, great size, great speed, great strength, and he had a breakout year for the Red Raiders this year. But Will Anderson has been the most productive, maybe most dominant end in college football the last two seasons for me. He's at the top of my prospects board on the entire board right now. And I just think this is another one of those times where we're hearing a lot of this crazy misinformation. And I don't know many people out there that can tell you that there are more prospects, defensive prospects out there than Will Anderson right now. So if you're going to give me the plus money, I'm going to take it.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I'm not sure what you think of that look, Tom, but I just take a look at Will Anderson, and I have found it very strange that a lot of the team has been coming in against him, and I do think something that happens with the NFL draft as well is that we try to overthink things that are very simple, and I think that has been the case with Will Anderson.
Yeah, no, I like that pick at plus money. I agree he's the best defensive player on the board. Now, you don't know what the teams are going to do, but again, we're not laying minus 250 here. You're getting plus money on a guy who a lot of people thought could win the Heisman last season before the college football year began. So, again, and I think what you're looking at is sometimes these mock drafts, it's not just like Adam Schefter who impacts odds, right? Like, these mock drafters fall in love with certain players. And, I think the kid from Texas Tech, like Andrew says, is getting a lot of steam right now. But for me, I could see Will Anderson going to one of those top 4 teams. Arizona's sitting there. I think he's a top 5 pick. Is he the first or second defensive player off the board? I don't know, but at plus money, that makes sense to me.
And you bring up something so good, Tom. How much do you take a look at these mock drafts, especially the late ones, and put a lot of credence in them? Or is it something where you take a look at some of these mock drafts and you think, man, someone's just reaching here. If I faded, I could actually get a really good plus number because a lot of people are going to follow insert persons here mock draft.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of people out there that people really, that they wait for their mock drafts to come, and I think they try to be as accurate as possible. And I like the ones where they're kind of, they have some connections and they're trying to think what the teams will do. But again, those are also the people that they could be feeding misinformation to. There's a couple of big time reporters out there who do mock drafts, do like one mock draft, and they're taking what they're hearing, but what they're hearing might not be true. So I also think, listen, I think these mock drafters do a heck of a job, but I think it's tough. Anything past 10 is kind of tough. And again, for me, I think the Eagles hold the key to the draft. They're so loaded. We don't really know where they're going to go. Are they going to take the offensive lineman if a good offensive lineman if he's there? Are they going to roll the dice and take the running back? I mean, they're the one team in the top 10 who could do that. So I think that's really going to impact how this draft plays out.
Well, one team that's not going to be impacting the draft, that would be our good friends, the LA Rams, who I believe that they're going to be on the clock in 2049 for their next first-round pick. So there is that aspect of it. But, Andrew, in terms of offensive players as well, because I know that you've got a lot of defensive props, you are taking a look at the Chargers and what they might be doing. They did not
sorry, Greg.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, yeah. Tom mentioned the Eagles and maybe taking a shot at the running back. He's obviously talking about Bajan Robinson there out of Texas, who is a tremendous running back prospect and kind of probably wishes he was born a decade or so earlier, and he might be the number 1 overall pick in the draft. He's a really, really intriguing prospect in terms of philosophies in the NFL today. We're talking about mock drafts there. There are a lot of mock drafts right now landing him in Atlanta right now at number 8. And like we've been kind of harping on this, but I think you really have to take that with a grain of salt. This is a team that's still, I'd say, a little ways away from contention. Yes, Desmond Ridder showed some flashes, but I'm not sure if he's the future at quarterback. And this team just still has a lot of holes right now. So I think Atlanta is the favorite right now to select him, but I would look a little further down the board, and if he doesn't go to the Eagles there at 10, which would kind of be a luxury pick for them because they they just have everything right now, so that is a place he could definitely land. I see a team like the Chargers maybe stepping in and selecting him at 21st or 22nd overall right now, and that's plus 1,400 right now. So I really like that value. Austin Eckler has requested permission to seek a trade, so they could definitely look to get younger at that position as well and more affordable. And he would be a great fit with Justin Herbert as well, I think.
Ironically enough, what I was setting you up was to mention your pick of the LA Chargers because I knew that you were taking a look at them to be able to draft a running back. And you say that you wish that Bajan Robinson was drafted a decade earlier. If he was drafted 2 decades earlier, who knows? Maybe a team would do something crazy like trade every single pick that they've got for a running back from Texas. Where have we seen that before? But, oh yeah, that's right. But I do think that is a really interesting look, and that leads into something interesting because, Andrew, you were mentioning the fact that the Chargers would have to trade up to get Bajan Robinson. I don't think that he's going to be falling to number 21, 22, somewhere in that neighborhood, but how much do you try to take a look and try to project forward for trades? And I'll talk to you both on this one. I'll lead off with you, Tom, on this front. How much do you try to project forward trades? Because that's what I always think is so tricky, and that just wrecks every single draft.
Yeah, well, first of all, if the Falcons draft Bajan Robinson, people better start working on their resumes. I tell you that right now, because the Falcons need a lot more than a running back. But in terms of trades, I think they're almost impossible. The only thing I really try to look at is if certain GMs have been there for a while and they either have a history of never trading up or really never trading back. If they're in if they're in a good trade situation, obviously Dave Gettleman had that for years where he always kind of stayed where he was. But you're right. You never really know what's going on behind the scenes. I look at some of these teams that have multiple picks. A team like the Texans could very well trade down from 12 to get more picks and just keep rebuilding that roster. But I think it's very hard to try to predict trades because I really think on draft day, teams get multiple calls from multiple teams trying to move up in different situations, and we don't really hear about it because they don't make the deal. So if the right deal comes, I think most teams would make a trade.
And I think that you bring up something good with that because it's just so difficult. The one thing you can bank on, the Green Bay Packers won't be trading up in the first round unless if it's to, draft a quarterback like Jordan Love when they've already got an MVP quarterback and lead into 5 years of Aaron Rodgers, whether or not he's going to be traded or not. I wonder where we saw that before. Oh, yeah, that's right. So, yeah, as a Green Bay Packers fan, I know all too well about that. But, Andrew, how do you try to gauge trades? Because I know that you were talking about that with the LA Chargers, and I think it's one of the most difficult things to do. But if you're able to hit that trade, it can be incredibly lucrative and profitable if you're betting on all these markets.
It's like Tom said, it's a very difficult thing to figure out because, like you said, every team wants more draft capital. Like there's not a team out there that doesn't want more picks. I think the only thing you can really look at here is if the Texans don't select a quarterback here at number 2 and they go with a Will Anderson or a Tyree Wilson. And then the Cardinals kind of have the free wheel of the board sort of thing. And I expect them to get a lot of calls if they don't take Stroud and someone trying to jump the Colts who also need a quarterback in that spot, maybe a team like the Raiders or the Titans. But outside of that position there, it's a really tough thing to gauge.
It's really tough as well because you also get down towards the back half of the first round as well. And I could see a team deciding to trade up and trying to get Hendon Hooker. That's a big reason why I did take the over 4.5 in terms of quarterbacks when I was seeing that at minus 110 because I do think that 5th year of control, it is something to really take a look at when you've got a spot like a quarterback being able to get these guys on a rookie deal. I think that is something that a lot of teams are going to be taking a look at, and that was a little bit of an angle that I was taking a look at as well. And I know that we've got a lot of angles from these two gentlemen with regards to their drafts, as we've got a pair of great guys that taking a look at the NFL, and Andrew Caley of Covers and Tom Casale of Action Network. And coming up next, we've got to talk about the prop market in terms of tight ends, because it is becoming a little bit more heavy, and I know that Tom has a play on that next on the Greg Peterson Experience on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Tom, I know you've been taking a look at the tight end market a little bit, and I know you've taken a little bit of a position on Dalton Kincaid. Take me through what you're firing in on with Dalton and why you think that he might be sliding a little bit.
Well, I think Andrew hit on it in the first segment about the tight end. The kid from Notre Dame, Michael Mayer, is now the favorite to be the first tight end off the board. He's been a top 15 pick conversation guy for the last 2 years. So I didn't really get it why Kincaid was listed above him. And then I was looking at things today, and he, like as Andrew said, Mayer moved in to the favorite, but they're both at 24.5. Their draft position. And I just don't see two tight ends going in the top 24 picks. And I think the one is going to be Mayer. So I thought there was still good value on the board with the over on Kincaid. So I took a shot thinking that with all these defensive players and all these quarterbacks that are going to be drafted, it's going to be hard to get two tight ends in the first 24 picks.
It might be hard to get two tight ends in, but Andrew, you think it's going to be easy to get plenty of wide receivers in the first round, which I like this look. You're taking the over on 3.5 wide receivers getting drafted in the first round. Who do you think is all going to be coming in off the board in the first round? And do you think that this is a little bit correlated because we are going to be having lots of quarterbacks, it seems, being drafted in this first round?
Well, this was an interesting market because it hit the board at 4.5, and then my immediate gut thought was under here because there was 4 guys initially: Jackson Smith and Jigba, Quentin Johnson from TCU, Zay Flowers, who has been rising up draft boards through this whole mock draft process, and Jordan Addison, the Biletnikoff winner from Pitt, who then went to USC and had a pretty good solid year this year. But then Johnson started falling off a lot of boards, and he seems like he's going to fall a bit. His now over-under is, I think, 26.5. But I think those first 3 guys, I think Flowers, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Addison are all pretty solid locks to go in the first round, particularly with some of the teams like the Giants and the Vikings being very wide receiver needy in the back third of the first round here. And then it's just, you always see a team fall in love with a guy. It could be a guy like Justin Hyatt from Tennessee, but maybe someone like Cedric Tillman from Tennessee as well. I think that's someone who's kind of being overlooked a little bit. He would have had a much better year if not for his injury. And there's another guy like Josh Downs as well from UNC. There's just lots of teams that could use wide receiver help, and I think 3 are a lock, and I wouldn't be shocked to see one more, whether it's Johnson or one of those other guys I mentioned.
I am in total agreement with you as well, and I think that Downs has a little bit of a shot to go in the first round as well. He's been falling off just a little bit. I was impressed by him personally, but it seems like the mock drafters have not been taking as much of a liking to him. But I know you're taking a liking to this guy, Tom, as you're able to get some plus money on a first-round bet on Jack Campbell, and I really like your reasoning for this. So take me through why you did decide to take a 3-1 shot on Jack Campbell to go in the first round, because it goes to a little bit more with necessity.
Yeah, I think Campbell is a solid early second-round prospect. I mean, if he was still on the board in day 2 with the Steelers sitting there at 32, I think he could be the pick. But when you look at him at plus 300, he's the favorite to be the first linebacker selected. Then he's plus 300 to go in the first round. And the thing about Campbell, he's such a polished player that you can put him in your defense and he can play as a rookie and give you minutes. And when you're looking at the back end of the first round, these teams that went to the playoffs and think they're going to the playoffs again, the Cowboys, the Bills, the Bengals, the Chiefs, the Eagles, this is a guy you can put him in your defense and he can play from day one. So, I mean, if this was, plus 110, I don't think I'd take a shot on it. But at plus 300 for the guy that the market thinks is the first linebacker off the board to go in round 1, I thought there was a little value there.
I do think that there's quite a bit of value as well, and that hits upon something that I think is always so fascinating, because you always hear a lot of these teams saying, oh, we're taking the best player on the board and everything like that. And Andrew, I want to ask this of you. How much do you take a look at just a little bit more necessity and maybe a position that is a little bit more scarce? Like it seems to be with linebacker like Tom was talking about, and thinking, man, you know what? There might be a little bit of value on insert your top player at this position here, going a little bit earlier than expected just because it's a little bit more shallow.
Yeah, I think that happened last year with the Cowboys. They took an offensive lineman out of Tulsa who
they've done that like 3 times, by the way.
Yeah, but like people were making fun of them for making a reach early in the first round, and he ends up being a starter from them from day one, and that's kind of what you get in the back half there. Teams will draft for need. I think the best player available is certainly something you have to take into account, particularly early on, especially if a guy like maybe a Will Anderson drops. It's gonna be really interesting to see how far Jalen Carter drops. Will he get past the Seahawks? Will he get to the Bears? And who's gonna take that chance on him if he does start to fall and he clearly becomes the best player on the board, a guy who some people will have on the top of their draft board when it comes to just pure talent alone.
Yeah, I mean, I was just laughing when you said that about the Dallas Cowboys because I still remember when they drafted Travis Frederick and everyone was like, you took like a second and third round guy in the first round, and it was like, well, we needed a center. He turned out to be pretty darn good for the Cowboys. Was it still a reach? Yes, he did turn out to be really, really good, though. So I always find that to be interesting. And I mean, speaking of guys that were really, really good back in the day, Joey Porter. And I know that you, Tom, have a little bit of a bet on his son because he's been one of the top DBs out there in all of college football. Take me through what you're taking a look at on the younger Porter.
Well, I once interviewed the older Joey Porter after a loss, and my advice to people would be don't do that. He yelled at me so hard I didn't think I'd get out of the locker room alive. So I guess I always kept that with me. His son plays very similar to him, but this is something I kind of bet every year. It's that third or fourth corner after those 2 guys everyone thinks is going to go in the top 10. I think there's a little value there because we talked about necessity and stuff. First of all, I like Porter as a player, but at 19.5, the way the game's played today, we mentioned Bajan Robinson, right? A decade ago, 2 decades ago, he might be the first pick. But now everyone's throwing the football, so you need corners. So you got to have corners, especially, listen, you guys might have seen Aaron Rodgers go in the AFC. They got some good quarterbacks there. Those defenses better have corners. So I always think there's some value there taking that third or fourth corner under their draft position because corners they're just coveted in the NFL. And you look at those 3 picks right before the 19.5 there. You're looking at the Bucks, the Lions, and the Steelers. You know, that Porter's their kind of player. I think he goes to one of those teams.
Yep, even though the NFC North not as quarterback rich anymore, you can never have enough corners in your life, and I do agree with you there because we notice it time and time again. And let's close it up with this one, Andrew, as I know you're taking a look at an offensive lineman that you're a little bit high on in Broderick Jones. What did you fire in on with a guy that won back-to-back titles over there at Georgia?
I'm taking him to be the first offensive lineman selected. You can get it at DraftKings at about plus 650. I've seen it as high as 10-1 though, and I really like that value just because this is a class where there's 4 guys: Skoronski, Wright, Johnson, Paris Johnson of Ohio State, and Jones. And if you look at 4 different mocks, you could see 4 different guys going first overall right now, and Jones is presenting the best value. All of them have their flaws. People say Skoronski's arms are too short, and he'll have to kick inside. But for me, Jones is that perfect combination of size and strength, and he started all 17 or 15 games for the Bulldogs last year. Only gave up 2 sacks in a really tough schedule. It just looks like that prototypical left tackle to me.
And I think that there's a lot of NFL teams that put a little bit more credence into what you do when you're at, Ohio State, Georgia, those big blue blood schools, and the people listening should always put a lot of credence into what you 2 gentlemen do. Andrew, you're amazing over there at Covers, and I know you, Tom, do amazing work over at Action Network. Appreciate you both joining me tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.